In this video, we'll look at several items related to drawing exterior elevations. One thing that's really helpful when drawing an exterior elevation is to X-reference in your floor plan so that you can project lines from it. So we'll start out by going to the Insert tab to see how that is done. On the Reference panel, we're going to select Attach. Be careful not to select Attach under Point Cloud. So we're going to select Attach, and then we're going to browse to the location of our DWG files. We'll notice that initially AutoCAD might be looking for image files, or in this case PDF files. We want to make sure the files of type is set to .dwg files. Then we're going to select our FLR1 floor plan drawing. We'll select Open, and in this Attach External Reference dialog box we have the ability to specify the insertion point on screen, or if we uncheck this we can let the drawing fall in at 0, 0, 0. If we were X-referencing in the second floor plan into the first floor plan, we might uncheck this so that the floor plans perfectly align. Because we're in an exterior elevation, we're going to want to specify where this goes, because we're going to want the floor plan off to the side. We don't want the drawing to scale. We want it to come in the correct size, so we would not check Specify on screen for scale. We can rotate it later if needed. And then finally the reference type. Most of the time we'll select Overlay. This way, when the exterior elevation drawing is X-referenced into another sheet, this floor plan drawing will not go along with it. If it were set to attachment, the floor plan drawing would go along with this exterior elevation drawing if it were X-refed into another drawing. So overlay is usually the best option here. We'll click OK, and then we'll initially just drop this in. So when you're first starting your elevations, you probably won't have any of the elevations done. I'm starting in a drawing just for your reference that has the elevations completed. And then what we would do typically then is draw lines. We might need to zoom in to be able to see a little bit more clearly what we're drawing. While I'm in the line command, I can spin my wheel and zoom out. These are just going to be temporary reference lines. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to select everything here and move it. So I typed in NEA and enter to specify the nearest snap for one time, and then after that the regular O snaps go back into effect. So I was able to use perpendicular there for the second pick. So when we project these lines down, we can start to make our vertical lines on our exterior elevations. Notice that we'd have to switch this floor plan out with the second floor to be able to determine where this line is. If we go into the X-reference dialog box, which is this icon in the lower right corner of the reference panel, we can see that we have our floor plan 1 drawing being X-refed in. We need to make sure that AutoCAD can always find the location and the name of that drawing, otherwise the drawing won't show up when this drawing is opened in the future. So when the exterior drawing is opened, the path and file name for that XREF must be found, because that entire drawing is not stored in this drawing. AutoCAD just remembers the path and the insertion point and what layer it is on. If we ever want to remove this drawing, we could right click and either unload it or detach it. If we unload it, it'll still be in the same spot, and we can turn it back on later without having to move it back into place like we just did. If we detach it, it's completely gone from this drawing. So at some point, once our elevations are done and the project's gone out for bids, perhaps we could detach it to clean this drawing up. So I'll hit escape for now. I mentioned that we'd have to load in the second floor plan to be able to determine where the second floor walls are. One quick trick with that would be to actually swap out the saved path here for the second floor drawing. So rather than detaching the drawing and attaching a new one, if I just kind of trick AutoCAD into looking at the second floor drawing for that same XREF, and knowing that my floor plans all have a common origin, I've now brought in the second floor plan and I can extend lines down from that. So this is a handy little trick that's not mentioned in the book. We can also project window locations down. So here's the left side of this window. If I project that down, I can see that determines where the window goes. This elevation version of the window has trim associated with it. So maybe in this case, rather than doing the side, we might project the middle of the window. And then when we insert the window block, remember if the block hasn't been used yet in this drawing, we'll have to go to more options and browse for that file on our hard drive. But once it's been used, then we can select it from this list. And you'll also notice the current layer right now is defining this block as being red dashed lines. If we go to the Home tab, the current layer is Foundation. So we want to switch this to Windows, and then we'll pick that block and switch it also to the Windows. Any future blocks we place would go on the correct layer, but this one was inserted on the wrong layer. Now this block can be moved from the midpoint to the point on this line, and then we'd have to figure out where it needs to go vertically, based on our wall section perhaps. Sometimes the windows or other blocks need to be exploded, like this window you can see is being obscured by the overhang for the roof porch. So in that case, we're going to select the Explode command on the Modify panel, and then we'll pick that window and right-click. When you explode a block, the lines within the block revert back to their layer that they were drawn on. So all of these lines in this block were properly drawn on layer 0. So because we exploded it, we need to select all those lines and switch them to the window layer. And then we'll imagine this line that I'm drawing here is the roof for the porch. And so some of these lines that are completely above it can just be selected with a window selection and deleted. Let me change the color of this window layer real quick so that it's a little bit more visible on the screen. And then we can use our trim tool that we learned about previously to trim multiple objects. We'll select that as our trim or cutting plane, right click, and then just run a crossing window through that entire area. Right click and select enter. And now we've just adjusted that window. So this window won't update anymore in the future if we redefine the block to have wider trim. For this particular window, we'd have to manually make that change. A couple other things that are talked about in the exterior elevations chapter is the ability to edit grips. So rather than using the trim or extend command, I could select this grip and then snap to the perpendicular of that line. If we hold down the Shift key, we can select multiple grips. Now I just let go of the Shift key and I'll click one of those again, and that allows me to edit both of them at the same time. If I right click on one of those grips, I have some options like move, copy, scale, rotate. So using the grips to edit geometry is very helpful. Another thing that you'll do, well, let's go ahead and detach this XREF real quick. So right click, detach, close the XREF dialog. Now the XREF is gone. I could perhaps delete these reference lines. So you'll notice these areas that represent the siding, the brick, and the shingles are all one object. Rather than drawing each one of those lines manually, which is certainly possible, we have a tool called the hatch command in AutoCAD that will fill in those areas automatically for us. So in the draw panel, we select the hatch command. We see the hatch creation contextual tab appears, and we can change it from a pattern, in this case, to user defined. For the siding, we're just going to have parallel lines that are a certain distance apart. So in this case, maybe our siding has a 4-inch exposure. And then I just simply move my cursor out into the drawing area, and AutoCAD will automatically give me a preview of that area. And if that's what I want, I can click and then close the hatch dialog. Everything goes on its own layer, so because the hatch was a different color than what I expected, I know that's a clue that the hatch is on the wrong layer. So I can pick the siding layer. Now for things that are more detail oriented, like the brick pattern, it's not just parallel lines, I do have to use, instead of user defined, pattern. And if I click this drop down here, I can see there's lots of patterns to choose from. So here's the AR brick standard option, and I have to figure out what the right scale is for the size brick that I'm going to use. And then I click in the area and then close the hatch command. If I select this again, I can switch back to the Home tab and put this on the correct layer. So that's how the hatch command works. Another thing that we'll look at is drawing a polyline to describe the grade. So we want to have a really thick line, and although the colors of the layers define line weights, they usually don't define a line as thick as this grade line that we want. So one way to do that is use the polyline command. So on the Home tab under the Draw panel, we have the polyline tool. When we click that, we are prompted to pick a start point. And when we start drawing, we can type, before we pick our second point, we can type W, and notice based on this drawing that we're already in, the default is 4 inches for the starting width and 4 inches for the ending width. So for what we're doing, we want both those numbers to be the same. And now as we draw lines, we can create a really nice heavy line to define the grade as it meets the building. And then we can show the positive slope away from the perimeter of the building. Another thing we want to learn in this chapter is how to show dashed lines. So if we draw a line, we want to be able to set this to be a dashed line. And one of the ways that we do that typically is by creating a layer, and we'll just call this layer test, and then specifying its line type. So just like we can change the color, we can also change the line type. When you initially come in here, you won't have hidden to as an option. So you're going to click the load button, and then I'll type H to jump down to hidden. And just to load something different, I'll do the hidden times 2, select OK, and now this drawing, exterior elevations, will always have this hidden 2 in it as an option. So I'm going to select OK. Maybe I want this to be a different color, magenta. That's a heavy line weight typically. So any line that is drawn on that test layer is going to have a dash associated with it. And to make sure those dashes show up properly, there's 3 variables that you should set so that the dashes tie into the annotation scale in the lower right, which right now is set to 1 to 1. So LT scale should be set to 1. PS LT scale should be set to 1. And then MS LT scale. So LT stands for line type. It should be set to 1. Now if you type regen and then specify your specific scale, actually in that case the regen wasn't really necessary. If our exterior elevations are going to be 1/4 inch equals a foot, and now we type regen. So after changing the scale, we type regen. This will make the dashes proportional for all the different scales that we might see this at. So just RE and enter is also regen. So this is what the dashes would look like on an 1/8 inch equals a foot drawing. And this is what the dashes would look like on a 1/4 inch equals a foot drawing. And if we had 2 of those drawings side by side on the same sheet printed out, the dashes between the 2 drawings would look exactly the same. That's the goal that we're shooting for here. So that's a quick look at some of the various things related to drawing exterior elevations.